In the Bible, we encounter, not just in the Bible, but in everyday language as well, although we find it more commonly in the Bible, there is unfamiliar jargon, terminology which we don't use anymore, and as time goes by, words change, and we lose some of the meaning that was originally intended by the authors of the Bible. Words change, and our understanding of old words also changes. English translation of the Bible, at least the most common one, the King James Bible, is 500 years old. And actually, I guess if you look at the Bible that Wycliffe translated in England, the first English Bible, it was another 200 years older than the King James Bible. Tyndale did one just before the King James Bible. Words in those Bibles reflected understanding at the time as to their meaning, but words have changed. Here's some examples that I give you of words that have changed and for which we have lost our understanding. We used to pay a little more attention to this maybe than we have lately, but here is something that I will bring to mind or inform you about if you hadn't been around long enough to hear these things talked about a lot. The word hell, for example. Now, we think of hell, at least in our society, because of false religions who give us the model of the immortal soul. After death, we either go to heaven and live in euphoria, or else we go to hell and we're eternally punished without any hope of redemption. And very awful, painful punishments are implied. But the word hell came from, is translated. It's a translated word, and it's translated from 3 other words, and we only have one word used from the 3 original words that were used in the Bible. Here are the 3 words. One of them is Hades. Now, to an Englishman in 1600, Hades simply meant the ground. And if I went out and tilled my garden, which I didn't get to do this week, but it was tilled because Hazel had Sheldon come up to the house, and she wanted a lot of the things that were finished up for the year. She wanted the garden to look better. So Sheldon took the tractor out in the garden and he tilled Hades. He tilled the garden, the place where we plant the seeds. The English people of 1600 planted their potatoes in hell. When a person died, yes, the person was planted in hell, but hell simply meant the ground or the grave. So that's a big distinction in the meaning of the word that we understand today versus that time. Second word we might think about that was translated into the word hell is Tartaru. That word what reflected a place of restraint ultimately for Satan and the demons. I think it's only used once or maybe twice in the Bible. But that word also was translated as hell. So it just adds to the confusion of understanding the word hell or understanding what hell means. The third word was Gehenna. Gehenna was the garbage dump outside of Jerusalem. And the garbage was taken out there, put into the dump, and there was, because of, I guess, lack of lack of fire extinguishers or whatever, fires got started in the dump and they burned continually. And as a garbage dump will, deep down under the ground, it continually smoldered. So it was the never-ending fire. It was a fire which never ended. And so that was the meaning of Gehenna. And Christ uses the analogy of Gehenna at some times, and the Bible uses it at some times, but it is really quite distinct. As you can see, the three words are quite distinct. We have distinctions in the word, for example, soul. Physical life was what soul meant, and when the word nephesh was used in the Old Testament. It didn't mean an immortal soul as we may think of it today. It meant physical life. And the soul that sins, the physical human being that sins, shall die. That's what it tells us in Ezekiel. Word I really want to focus on a little bit more today, because it will tie in with the sermon. And it's a word that maybe we have kind of lost understanding of in the way that it might have been understood in the Bible in old times, is the word Gentiles. So I want to define maybe a little bit better the word Gentile and show you not only the physical application of it, but also the spiritual application of the word Gentile. Now, question. Who do we think of as Gentiles? Well, we may think of some groups of people as being obvious Gentiles. And yes, we correctly think about that, but do we really understand totally what the word means? I just thought to put down some examples here. The Chinese, they are Gentiles. The Japanese, they are Gentiles. People from Africa, mostly at least black Africans, are Gentiles. Native Americans are Gentiles. And we could go on and on and on. And so, how would we distinguish between those who are Gentiles and those who are not? Question. Here is an example from the Bible, just of the use of the word Gentile. Word Gentile as such is not used in the translated text as many times as you might think. Romans chapter 2 and verse 9, Paul draws a connection or a distinction between Gentiles and Jews. Paul here says, Romans chapter 2 and verse 9, tribulation and anguish, this it is an expression of how both groups will experience that, only maybe not at the same time. Maybe there would be a difference in the time frame for the two groups. Tribulation and anguish upon every soul of man that does evil. Doesn't matter, Jew or Gentile. Same thing, tribulation and anguish. But he says of the Jew first. Now, I'm not sure, I didn't check the original text on this. I don't know if Paul really meant the Jew. I think he meant it probably because the church in Rome was about half Jews and half non-Jews. And also of the Gentiles. So he's showing you an equality between the two there. I'd like to just, because this relates to the sermon, discuss a little bit about who the Israelites were. Jews were a subcategory of the Israelites. So I'd like to talk about who the Israelites were. Abraham was the man from whom all of the Israelites subsequently descended along with his wife Sarah, and they were known, their descendants can be known and categorized as Israelites. Now, one of the things to notice here particularly, especially as we're going to get to the spiritual application of Israelites as well as the physical application, Abraham's name originally was Abram and meant father. And it was changed by God to mean father of many nations. Now, if we're looking at a comparison between the name father and the spiritual father, Abraham then is a descendant, or Abraham then is a comparative analogy to the true father. And we might look at the descendants, physical descendants of Abraham, as being counterparts of the spiritual descendants of God the Father. After Abraham, his son Isaac, and all of Isaac's children would be known as Israelites as well. Well, maybe Esau's descendants would not be. And then after Isaac, Jacob, or Israel, and his 12 sons also would be known then as Israelites. So that's category one. You know, if we look at humanity as a whole, there's one category who are Israelites. Those who are Israelites are the descendants of Abraham through Isaac through Jacob. Category two. These are the Gentiles. Everybody else. Does it include the Japanese? Yes. The Chinese? Yes. People from Africa, Native Americans, or whoever else I may have mentioned in the introductory part? Yes, it includes all of those. There are two categories, Israelites and everybody else. And we'll be touching on all nations whenever we talk about the sermon. Now let's just crystallize a little bit the fact that there is actually a spiritual nation of Israel. I'd like to read to you Galatians chapter 6 and verse 16. Here, God refers to the people of His church regardless as to their lineage or descent, who they may have descended from, as being Israelites if they have been begotten by God's Holy Spirit, if they are a part of God's church. Galatians chapter 6 and verse 16. As many as walk according to this rule, and you can read the context, but it was a part of the obedience of the law as Paul was teaching it. As many as walk according to this rule, peace be on them, mercy and upon the Israel of God. He's referring to God's church as being the Israel of God, the counterpart to the physical nation of Israel, which is not really all that important. What is important is that they symbolized the coming of God's true nation of Israel, His church. And so I hope that helps you to understand a little bit about Gentiles and what the Bible means when it talks about Gentiles. Everybody on the face of the earth except those physically who descended from Jacob or Israel are Gentiles. They are the rest of the world, the rest of the nations. Spiritually speaking, if there is an Israel of God, which is God's true church, and it is regarded by God as being His nation, then there are also spiritual Gentiles. The rest of the whole world who is not keeping or understanding the truth of God are, by analogy, the spiritual Gentiles of this world. So I hope you understand that distinction. I think it has a lot of impact on everything that's said in the Bible, because those physical analogies and those relationships are very important to our understanding.